Hey guys, welcome back. So now we're getting into Miles Morales King in Black, and mainly because I've been going back and forth on doing the new clone saga that's taking place within Miles Morales, starting in issue 25, but it's more or less started already. But before I did, I wanted to cover his King in Black tie-in just to see if you guys were interested first, and from there I just let you guys make the call. But before we jump in, if you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe to catch spills every week, and don't forget to hit that bell up top so we can squad up in the comments for the first hour. Alright, so jumping into Miles Morales King in Black. Like, with the way that this starts off, Miles is just getting back to Brooklyn Vision's academy, and when he gets there, the whole school is evacuated because of the symbiote invasion. But also when he gets there, Genki is the only one there, and mainly because he waited around in the midst of all this danger to confess to Miles that he's dating Barbara. But when he sees Miles and this symbiote dragon pops up soon after, he doesn't get to tell him. But that conversation is continued later on in the Miles Morales clone saga, but at this time, not so much, because as soon as Miles gets there, he's back out and after this dragon. But like, when this happens at this point, like going back to this point in time, like Miles, he doesn't realize that this is a symbiote. So when he webs up the dragon by the eyebrows and just flies off with it, it isn't until he's up close and on top of this thing till he realizes what he's dealing with. And keep in mind, with this happening, like this is fairly early on towards the invasion. And for Miles, like a lot like the other tie-ins that we talked about, this is like his crash course to dealing with Knull's actual invasion. But with him realizing that this is a symbiote, like that is something that Miles has dealt with before, both in the 1610 universe, though we don't get much of a reference to that here, or any reference, but then also before in Venom Volume 4, Issue 4, when he teamed up with Eddie when the Grendel had initially arrived to Earth, which was his initial encounter with Knull by way of Knull's avatar, but it was nowhere near the comparison of Knull's full power during King in Black. And then you have Absolute Carnage when Miles was taken over by a symbiote for a short while, which he later escaped on his own. And this event, or this most recent memory, is what he calls back to here, when he remembers like the same way that he had gotten free in Absolute Carnage was through his Venom Blast, and because of that, that's what he uses here on this dragon, which has been bonded to a symbiote and taken over by Knull. So Miles just figures like, hey, if it worked for him, then it'll work for this guy. And he lets the dragon know like he can drive Knull out, he's done it before, but it's gonna hurt. But when this happens, like the thing that threw me is like, I don't know where this dragon came from. And I've recently jumped back into Miles Morales, like I'm caught up through issue 25 at this point, and I'm still clueless about this thing. Like it's probably something planted for something later on, and it really feels like something that would be more so connected with what had went on with Namor and King in Black, but with seeing the actual dragon here, like, I don't know. But just to be clear, like all the other dragons that we've talked about throughout Knull's invasion, they have been symbiotes who have taken the form of a dragon and not literal dragons, just in case you guys were wondering, or just hoping that the Avengers weren't going around just murdering dragons. But in this case for Miles, like after freeing this dragon from Knull's influence, he then gets a text from Kamala like 911 down on the Lower East Side. And with seeing this, Miles hitches a ride from this dragon, like this random dragon who has some explaining to do. And by the way, like if you guys know something that I don't about this dragon, like just let me know in the comments, like I appreciate it in advance. Because after this, like when this dragon drops Miles off, it just goes on about its way. And when this happens, like from here, like the story begins. Because as soon as this dragon drops off Miles, his spider senses go off and he's immediately attacked by a nullified Kamala. And I'll say this about Kamala because like she's one of those characters who's just cute and bubbly. And personally, like I'm not the biggest fan of her character, but I do like her story. But I'll say this also, like as far as her power set, and even before we get into like the nullified modifications here, because just as far as her power set, like if Kamala was a villain of any sort, like if she wasn't just this cute little girl from Jersey City, she would practically just be like your T-1000 Terminator with nearly unlimited mass. Because aside being able to literally shapeshift and change her appearance and just look like whoever she wants, she can extend her limbs or adjust the density if she wants to smash something, and with Knull in control of her, like that's really the Kamala that we're getting here. And when she attacks Miles, like with everything we see her do, she can practically do without the symbiote, whether it's growing and smashing or attempting to impale someone, which Kamala could do, but that's not really her approach left to her own decision making. And when Miles runs into her here, like he gets the full brunt of all of this. And had he not had those Spidey reflexes, like this all would have been bad. But when Miles gets here and he's attacked by Kamala, Knull speaks through her, and Knull greets Miles like he had been waiting for him. And even at this point, like Knull does have some familiarity with Miles, and mainly from that initial encounter where Knull had came to Earth and Miles teamed up with Eddie against Knull's avatar, which feels like forever ago at this point. But that was like mainly at the beginning of Venom Volume 4. But with Miles pushing Knull back at the time, but then also freeing himself from a symbiote within Absolute Carnage, like this is why Knull refers to Miles as a defiant little spider. But through the course of this, for one, Miles, his main priority is saving Kamala, but also because of his past experience, he is super serious about not being bonded with a symbiote again. But with Miles trying to reach through to Kamala, Knull lets Miles know that he has control and that Kamala is nothing but a child of the Hive. And when Miles hears this and he tries to web Kamala up, that doesn't work because she can change her shape, allowing the webs to pass right through her while she's still charging at him. And with moments like these, like a couple things just run through my mind. Because for one, with Knull taking over her, it's almost as if he uses Kamala's powers better than Kamala could herself. And I don't know if better is necessarily like the best word to use or best way to describe it, because when Knull takes over her, it's definitely more creative and aggressive. But then the second thing is like when you see Kamala and the symbiote aspect both come through, it then kind of makes me think like, man, this is the perfect symbiosis here. Because it's kind of like what we had seen with Reed Richards, or I mean the Maker, who's Reed Richards, but much like we'd seen with the Maker, who could practically turn into a monster. But with Kamala it's much different because as a host, she brings a couple more features to the table as far as power set. But at this point with Knull using Kamala to pull Miles closer in and tell him how he doesn't matter, Kamala doesn't matter, and their world doesn't matter as like his final statement before bringing Miles into the Hive, because for Knull, much like we'd seen in Carnage Born and Absolute Carnage, death is more of a liberation from his perspective. But as Knull pulls in Miles close, Miles just apologizes for this venom blast that's about to come. And with the way that Miles charged it up, it immediately had me thinking of the Arthur fist meme, because that fist was balled up something serious. But even when this happens, like here's the thing, like over the years for Miles, he's learned to control how much energy he puts out with his venom blast. And when he hits Kamala the first time here, he tries to do just enough to get her free, but when he does, it's still not enough. Like he barely gets her hand and Knull just pulls her back in. And after that, when he hits her like with a lower steady charge, he still needs Kamala to fight off Knull as best as she can, because with what he's doing, it can only hold the symbiote back for a short while and create a small window. But even with doing this, Miles knows if he goes long enough, even at this level with his venom blast, he'll eventually burn out. So while he's pushing the symbiote back and telling Kamala like, come on, you're Miss Marvel, you might be the bravest person I know you can do this. And when this happens, like it's really like it's pulling from the history between Kamala and Miles and their friendship, and Miles just not giving up on Kamala. Because with a lot of the things that Miles is saying and telling her, with saying that he knows she's strong, he knows she can pull through, and like a lot of this is pulling from their former time as teammates, like after Civil War II, during their time as champions. And it's really like we're getting this moment of Miles being that friend who won't give up on his friend. And when Miles notices that the first blast didn't work, and doing the second blast, low power for a longer amount of time didn't work, because even still Knull pulled her back in, and it's with seeing this that Miles gives it his everything. Knowing that good and well, like last time he did this against Knull, or even against his Grendel at the time, that this would take all of Miles's energy and render him fully defenseless, which for Miles is a really big sacrifice, because he hasn't taken his Venom Blast this far for a long time for good reason. But in this moment, if it's the only way that he can free Kamala, and even if it hurt her to get her out, at the end of the day, he's gotta do what he's gotta do. But with Miles exerting this much energy with his Venom Blast, he's blindly trusting Kamala. Because with him exerting all his power and leaving himself defenseless, he's trusting her that when she gets free, that she'll have his back and protect him when he can't protect himself. And so when Kamala gets free and she shakes off the thoughts of all that death in Knull's voice, she then recovers quickly and she goes to find Miles, who initially she was just looking for to thank him. But when she turns to thank him and she sees him there like pretty much just slumped, she then runs to Miles, picks him up, and tells him like, don't worry, I got you. And this is what ends it here for Miles Morales in King in Black. And in the next issue of Miles Morales, we then pick up with Miles and Kamala kind of catching up, which later takes us into the confession that Genki was trying to get to earlier. But from here for Miles, like his story pretty much goes into his Clone Saga, going from issue 24 forward. And I've been digging the Clone Saga so far. And if you guys feel the same and you want me to cover it, just let me know down in the comments. And so now real quick, I want to give a special shout out to all the patrons. Thank you guys for all your support. And for anyone who's new here who wants more information on how to support the channel, I got a link below so you can go to patreon.com/dopespill. But that'll do it for this one, guys. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below, and we'll do it again in the next one. Alright, later.